Are black men oppressed or addicted to the language of oppression? Author Jamar Camper, aka the intellectual sniper, says it's time for black men to abandon victimhood and embrace self-reliance. But is he right? Diversity consultant LaTrice Ross joins us for a provocative debate on accountability, empowerment, and the future of black progress. Join us live on the Mental Dialogue YouTube page this Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Mental Dialogue perspective, all I ask is that you think. Good morning to everybody out there. Welcome to the Mental Dialogue Perspective. We are live on YouTube for our pop-up shows. I got my regular co-host in this thing with me now, LaTrice Ross, diversity consultant, and a special returning guest, sniper or intellectual sniper, as I refer to him. But I'll go ahead and let the queen introduce herself as we get started on today's show. If you are a first-time watcher, we react to various clips on the topic that we're discussing. I say we are the best in the world at conversations on race, sex, and culture. Did it for 8 years on Blog Talk Radio. Now we're live on YouTube via video. Thank you, Queen LaTrice, for being here with me. If you will, introduce yourself, give your background as it relates to this topic. If you will, then we'll introduce our special guest.
Sure. I'm LaTrice Ross. I've spent the last 15 years or so as a diversity consultant, where I've gone into organizations and helped create equitable frameworks so that folks from historically underrepresented groups can achieve success in corporate America if that's the path they choose. I love doing the work, and even it's my hobby as well. So.
Nah, love it. I want to introduce my man, Sniper. Thank you for coming black on the show, as we like to say on the Mental Dialogue Perspective. This brother is a renowned author. I've been following him for a number of years. He often, from what I understand, you can obviously give your own background, but I know that you coach, you speak, and I just admire your perspective and thought you were worthy of today's topic. So if you will, share whatever you think you should share, and we'll get into our first cut and start this discussion. If you are just now tuning in, we are discussing are black men still facing racism? But go ahead, Sniper, tell them who you are, and we'll play our first cut.
Absolutely. Intellectual Sniper here. I want to say thank you so much for inviting me on your platform again. It's always a blessing to be invited back. With that said, I am a best-selling author. I am a mindset coach. And also, of course, you know, I'm a content creator as well, which is the way we connected.
No, absolutely. And so again, just to highlight today's topic, if you're just now tuning in, are black men still facing racism? And I wanted to go with a little historical context with the first clip. This conversation has been around maybe a lot longer than we actually believe. Obviously, a lot of this has come up due to the Voting Rights Act being gutted, if you will, and we talked about that on our Politically Conscious show, so make sure you're tuning in weekly for that. But I wanted to, again, start this conversation with some historical context and get the reaction of both our guests. So let's start here. This is a little longer cut than we'll play for the rest of the day, but y'all definitely bear with this cut because I'm very interested in our guests' thoughts on this conversation.
But on other plantations, Negroes are being forced off the land, partly because it's now more economical to use machines, and partly because some Negroes, dissatisfied with the system, are trying to change it. That system has kept him in debt and given him little for his labor. Negro tenants work the land. The landowner advances the money for farming. And on many of the plantations, the Negro is forced to buy at the company store. Everything is bought on credit. In most stores, prices are landowner charges interest on the credit. Many illiterate Negro tenants are unable to keep track of what they owe. Without cash of their own, they cannot buy things elsewhere or afford to move off the land. The Negro seldom gets out of debt to the landowner and is therefore easy to control. This year, a way was opened for the Negro farmer to get some money. Since the 30s, the government has paid all farmers to reduce cotton acreage. Payments for the tenants were sent to the landowner. Each year, many tenants, illiterate, kept ignorant of the program and not knowing what they were doing, would sign their X on the back of the check, endorsing it to the landowner. But this year, the government sent the checks directly to the tenant. Some of the tenants wanted to keep the money for themselves. When they refused to sign their checks to the landowner, he took away their land. Hundreds of people are being kicked off the land. Some are trying to organize against the day when they too will be forced to move.
I don't see no reason why y'all men was women too. Y'all just might as well to get ready and get right side me. I'm fighting for y'all. I ain't fighting for myself. Y'all just might as well to get ready, get some nerve if you had to get you a drink of whiskey and get some. And that'll get your nerve up, but I don't need none. Get your nerve up and say, I'm going on with Miss Moore or Pearl or whatever you call it. It doesn't matter. So we're going to stand up, and we want these men to stand up and be men. Let's not get out here in the country and do a lot of talk. And when the white man come round, yeah, I suppose. And the thing for us got to do, us got to get to moving now, because the time is drawing near. So us might as well to get ready, because when 1967 step in here, us ain't got know what end of the road to take. It's going to be intense up here, like up here in Lowndes County.
Tents like these are springing up all over the South, a sign of Negro defiance of the system. They've been kicked off the land for civil rights activities and for demanding higher wages. But they refuse to move out of the South, a brave but often futile gesture, because most of these rural Negroes have no skills other than farming. And even if they did, there are no jobs available to them. What few jobs there are go to the whites.
Very interesting cut, if you will. Thinks it gives some historical context for today's discussion. If you're just now tuning in, are black men still facing racism? With special guest, intellectual sniper, and my co-host LaTrice here. For those just now tuning in, we started with that cut. I think it gives a lot of historical context. Some of the same language that sister that stood up and says, "Hey, we're gonna put a battery in these men's back. Come stand with us. We're gonna make sure y'all stand up on what's happening." And now we're having this discussion still years later. Part of the reason I shared this, and LaTrice, I'll actually start with you. Part of the reason I shared this is because quite often when we face things that look like or seem like racism today, we actually, I would offer psychologically, kind of assume it to be just as similar to what we saw in that clip. Like, I think it's so psychologically as a collective, we think we'll say something that we often say is things have not changed. Here it goes again, and trying to put us back into that period. And you hear that period being very different than what we face today. So just your thoughts, kind of what I've added to it in addition to the clip. Go ahead, Queen, and then I'll go to Sniper.
I think it's based on their lived experience. While we have definitely made strides from the 1930s when farmers were being dispossessed of their land, but there is still a lot of progress that still needs to be made, and much of the progress that needs to be made has to do with sort of the hidden structural systemic racist ideology that still exists. But I understand why they say it, but I think it's more of an easy or lazy way of saying we still have work to do.
Fair enough. Sniper, I think that clip relates to what we're faced with right now as far as how we see it from a psychological standpoint. Clearly, at that time, they were faced with some actual racism. I'm talking about open, overt racism. And that's not me, right. It's not me saying racism doesn't exist today. I'm not going that far for anybody out there watching, but I'm just saying clearly what they were faced with was their livelihood and where they could even work and feed themselves, which is not the type of racism we're faced with today. But the women are saying, hey, men, y'all, we're going to put you battery in your back, because when the guy come around, y'all get the yes, sir, and, yes, sir, and this, and don't want to fight. Go ahead. Your thoughts about how that clip relates to what you're seeing today from your perspective.
Okay, so number one, I just think we should acknowledge that we're talking about a very complex, very multi-layered subject, so no, all the answers are not going to come today. But what I would love this conversation to do is just spark the brains of those watching or listening to start just at least having a different perspective on things, or at least seeing how are you contributing to the current social climate. Just as a disclaimer. With that said, great clip. It definitely gave some historic context for what was going on back in the day. Now, how it relates to today is the women back then were looking for their men to take a more action approach to things instead of a passive approach, right? The difference is back then, of course, you were probably more quick to lose your position if you spoke out of line, if you said something crazy, or if what they used to say, you're an uppity Negro, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the men are going to be a little bit more cautious because obviously the economic background, the landscape is not friendly, right? But I want to just point out that even then, even back then, the women were looking for the men to step up in a certain way. So that might not have meant technically standing up to the white man and saying something like, "Oh, we're not going to do this," but it could mean just coming up with a more hidden strategic plan of saying, "Okay, we're going to do this for however long, and then we're going to move forward." Now, the clip said something very important. It said, the men lack other skills, and
Mm-hmm.
that happens today, right? There are certain skills that us as Black men we are lacking to move forward. The interesting thing is today, and I'll make this last point and wrap up. Today we have more technical skills than ever before. We have more technical skills than the ancestors of the past, but the psychological moving forward is unfortunately missing. So yeah, I just find it interesting that even back then, decades ago, those
Absolutely.
women were looking for solutions. And then I feel like today, women more so than ever are just looking for, okay, I get it. We're not saying your fight is not real, but where do we move forward? Where's the plan, the comprehensive plan that's going to push us forward so that we reach the attractive results.
Now, I think that again, that clip sets this conversation up perfectly, right? And so, LaTrice, I heard you, in a sense, allude to the systemic racism aspect. And so, this next clip highlights something that has consistently happened in reference to the workforce. Because again, that clip highlighted into, to Sniper's point, the skill set specifically for those sharecroppers were at the time limited to farming. That's, in a sense, that's all they knew, as the clip said. However, even in the marketplace, and to Sniper's points, there are so many opportunities that are available to us with the skills that we now have, technical skills specifically. However, we're still faced with some systemic stuff. So I'm curious how both of you look at this. We'll start with Sniper in the response to this clip here. This is a very short clip, but it highlights something that you, LaTrice, having done diversity work for so long. This has consistently been, this type of study has been done almost every 5 to 10 years, and it really has not changed. And this comes from Joshua Doss, data analyst. I'm sorry, y'all, a data analyst that I use on the Politically Conscious show quite often.
Let's discourse, shall we?
Stanford did a study where they sent out thousands of duplicate resumes to Fortune 500 companies. Half of these fake resumes had black sounding names like Tyrell and Lamar. The other half had white sounding names like Walker and Bobby. Half of the black applicants had a felony on their resume. Half did not. Half of the white applicants had a felony on their resume. Half did not.
About 34% of whites with no criminal record received a callback or job offer. In the case of black testers, 14% of those with no criminal background received a callback or job offer. But the most surprising finding was really related to blacks with no criminal background relative to whites with a felony conviction. We find that a white applicant with a felony conviction fared just as well, if not better, relative to a black applicant with a clean record.
A white applicant with a felony conviction got callbacks at a higher rate than a black applicant with the same resume that didn't have a felony conviction.
This suggests that being black in America today is essentially like having a felony conviction in terms of one's chances of finding employment.
This is structural racism.
So, Sniper, I'll imagine that you, as a mindset coach who actually train people in a sense to overcome all obstacles, no matter what they are, not just racism, just to be clear here. But again, having brought you on as a mindset coach, what's your perspective to those who may follow your page, not know enough of your background, and you see a clip like that? What would you say to that systemic stuff that you've already kind of acknowledged per se, but what's your thoughts on a clip like that? And then we'll go to our diversity expert on that actual clip.
Okay, so in this clip, I'm gonna speak a little bit more frank, right? Because yes, we have to acknowledge that there is some unfairness in those applicants that they said, the white applicants with a criminal background still got the job or still at least got a call back versus the black ones that didn't, or the black sounding names, correct? But this is a very blunt response, but I just feel like it needs to be said. We can't keep saying, oh, the system is not built for us, but you keep applying to the system that's not built for you. You keep applying to these structures that you say are not for you. And this is what I meant about connected to the last clip, that in some other way there has to be a more strategic plan of moving forward. Because at that point, then you are expecting a human or system to change. Now, can you make dents in that system? You could. I'm not saying you can't. But what I am saying is that the hope and
Latrice,
prayer that a
your thoughts on
system.
clip or anything Sniper had to say? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I would have. Is he cutting out for you, Latrice? I think you may be cutting out. I may have you come out and come back in. Is he cutting out for you, Latrice? He's cutting out for me.
It's
I
you.
want to see if it's me or him.
It's you.
All right. Yeah, I had paused because you had
so you
said
can hear
something.
him consistent. Okay, Sniper.
Sniper.
Yeah. Well, you
off
cut out for me, so I didn't know if it was for if
Oh,
it was
okay,
me or
got you. No
I'm going to
problem.
come out and come in. Sorry to cut you off. Yeah, I'm gonna come out. Finish your thought, and Latrice, you just respond. I'm gonna come out and come back in if y'all are hearing me right now. Okay.
Okay.
So I was saying that yes, we can come up with a plan to make dents in the system, but at some point, you're hoping that the system completely changes in your favor. It might not ever change in your favor. It might not ever change to your benefit or how you would want it to go. So, with that said, this is what I meant about connected to the last clip, that you must now come up with a more strategic plan regarding yourself. Is that going to happen overnight? No. And then within this conversation, I want to definitely say to those listening that the things that you do today to implement change for the betterment of yourself and your family, there's a lot of things that are not going to happen in your generation, but you're setting it up so that it betters the next generation.
Latrice, your response to any of it?
Sort of to the point of the part of the statement about folks continuing to apply for those positions for employment. I think that's a given because you have to, in most instances, you have to have money on hand to do some of the other things that might allow us more economic independence. For instance, if we want to start a business. With technology, particularly with AI, there are ways now that you can launch a business that are relatively low cost, but you still need a source of income. And so I think it's one thing to, if you're going to extend that statement saying that there have to be other things that we can do. For a lot of folks, you may have to provide some context for what are those other things that we can do rather than applying for jobs in a system that's not designed for us. But additionally, that pushes the onus back on the person that's being impacted. And I think that that's where the crossroads sort of lay themselves down. Because how do we fix the system? Because we are supposed to be in a system where everyone's judged on merit, but we clearly see that that's not. And so we're asking Black folk to navigate a system without sources of income, with the wage gap constantly expanding, without giving them any ideas to how to do that.
So let me throw out an idea because I like what Sniper says. Can y'all hear me clearly now? Because I just got back in, so I want to make sure y'all can hear.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. So I like how he says being strategic, and I like how, Latrice, you highlight the crossroad. Mm-hmm. So the crossroad, and y'all can both give me y'all thoughts on this, and then we're going to play another clip. The crossroad is there's, as Sniper already said at the beginning of the show, we won't have all the answers today, right? We're just trying to have us think about this, right? So I would offer that the crossroad is things that Latrice, you and I have advocated even back when we were on the Mental Dialogue show, and you hear me say this all the time. There are specific positions in the country in which there's not enough Americans to fill. So one of those strategies would be to, in a sense, emphasize our children enter those, get those skills, get the skills that Americans in general are lacking. And now you will become in demand because you have the skills that were quite often given for the H-1B1 visa, that we actually literally bring skills outside of the country because Americans lack them. I'm not saying this is an answer for everybody. However, I think Sniper is saying, hey, here's a strategic plan for how to navigate the marketplace. Let's highlight that versus just playing the clip. And I'm not, and I'm definitely not trying to have this conversation in the extremes. We're in the middle here. So we're massaging some of what I would say Intellectual Sniper is offering. What is a strategic plan? While he's saying, I'm acknowledging that very unfair real landscape. Whereas some people try to have these conversations as if that unfair landscape doesn't exist. I don't think he's saying that. LaTrice, I think we're just massaging it all together, if you will. But that's one example of a strategic plan, overemphasizing that our children enter into the skills that Americans are lacking. And these other positions are coming along as well. Like people are starting advocating for plumber and plumbing, all these skill sets that won't go away even in the technology age. There's these basic things, skills that are going to be around even in the technology age that we also, I see youth groups encouraging Black boys to get into some of those skills. So people are starting that conversation, but that would be one of those strategic plans. LaTrice, your thoughts, and I want to go to a clip after you speak.
So I think that that idea still doesn't address the Stanford study, which said that there were folks who had the skills and there was a need for those skills. But if you had a Black sounding name, you still weren't selected. And even in those instances where you may have rare skills, you may get to that, you may get past that first or second point, but the filters that filter them out still exist. And so how do we address that? Because saying getting additional skills is great. And I absolutely, we agree on that. Because that is definitely a pathway to having more of us employed, but you still have come against that filter of bias in the employment process.
So I'll just throw out, for the sake of not having the study specifically here, we don't know if it was, most of those studies are, I would say the ones that I've seen in the past, they're kind of just generalized where they intentionally send out the resumes to be able to study it. We don't know if that was happening in the areas that I'm talking about going after. Like we don't know if it was having the skills and somebody with a felony getting it over. I'm just saying we're just not aware of that from just the basic understanding of the.
But I don't think that matters though, because if
I respect it. I respect it.
Out,
I respect it. I think it does matter in the sense of and this is anecdotal. I'll admit this. This is very anecdotal, but I do see some of our children, some of our young men that are going in the high needed areas, and they're not having that problem because it's such a need and it's such a shortage. I don't see that happening where Americans falling short. How are they picking someone over that when we don't even have enough people doing it? I'm just saying, I just want to, and I'm not saying this is the answer to the study. I'm just highlighting, I can't imagine that's happening when we don't even have enough people doing it. I'm just saying.
But it does, because it gets, so having a high skill will get you in the room, but having to, staying in that room represents a subsequent challenge, because there's this concept in corporate DEI or with Black folk and other unrepresented groups in the workplace of prove it again tax, if you will, where you have to consistently prove your worth, your skill set, your knowledge over and over and over again. And if you make the very tiniest of mistakes, you're going to pay for that mistake, oftentimes with your job. And so these are the types of invisible structures that even if we employed what you say, still happen and will continue to happen, even if there is a need that needs to be filled. I've seen it happen in the workplace, in the tech sector.
Hey, Queen, I'll just make this clear. When I'm saying go after these positions that are needed, I'm not acting like these things don't happen. Okay. I don't think you should.
I agree with you on that.
You should hear it that way.
Yeah, I
Because
agree with you on
we've
that
already
because
acknowledged the landscape. So if we've already
absolutely.
yeah,
And
so
I'm
if we've
bringing up
acknowledged
that
the
even when they
landscape,
get in there,
I
that they
get that.
still have
But
structure.
if we lean into that, then it's like no matter what I do, I think that's the risk of leaning into. Here's a strategic plan with the landscape as it is, and if we just keep highlighting that it still will happen, I think you're
No. So you
psychologically.
highlight it so that you prepare for it. And you know that you have to, as our parents and grandparents said, do twice as much to maintain that space
I
there.
think that's one of the
So
worst things we could
well,
teach our kids.
I disagree with it. I agree with you on the fact that we need to take those high skills. I
Let's
agree
do
with
it.
you that our kids, when they go to college, if that's the choice they choose, or if they go to trade school, which I think is a much better option now, that they look at those skills that are in high demand and low quantity.
Before I go to the clip, Sniper, anything you want to say before we go into the next clip?
I just want to add that in my opinion, it's especially today, I believe Black people, for the most part, have the skills. You know, we always hear the education stats about how Black people are enrolled in college. Black people don't have a plan. That's where we suffer at. We don't have a step-by-step comprehensive plan of moving forward. So once again, if there's a prestigious firm, right, and I want to be in that prestigious firm, and let's say I might get in, I might not, or by chance they let me in based on merit or skill set, but then there's still going to be, like you said, invisible things that's stopping me from moving forward within that firm, right? At some gesture, at some point, at some vantage point, I have to now acknowledge, okay, there's things that's going to stop me from moving forward in this prestigious firm that I wanted to be a part of, right? So I'm making that choice. So now, do I start my own firm? Do I do landscaping jobs? Do I go out here and try to change things? So, like I said, it's the lack of a plan of why I think we have these problems. And that's what the lady was saying from the get-go in the other clip, the first clip, is okay, we could put the battery in the men's back, right? But they're not moving forward, probably likely based on, well, what do I exactly do?
Right. And yeah, I love it. I love it. Let me go to this clip and I'll just close with this. And I'm not saying what I said is the answer because, again, we can't give all the answers in one show. I'm just highlighting that I would say going after the high need areas of the country is somewhat of a plan. I'm just throwing it out as somewhat of a strategic plan. Okay, we know this is the landscape. So I'm just even saying the sniper, that could be part of the plan to overemphasize the areas that are in high need. So you will face, I would say, less of what we saw in the clip. Again, it's not the complete answer, but we could drive more of our Black children into those Black people, Black men, Black women into those positions. Sometimes it needs to be pointed out because they don't have any direction, as Sniper has said. Now let's get into what even sparked this conversation, and it's the perspective of what happened with the Voting Rights Act. I want to have a conversation specifically about that. But when you get into politics, this is something that has happened in a sense, in the culture that needs to talk about when we ask this question: are Black men still facing racism? And I thought this clip from Nita Turner was a good apropos for this conversation, not directly about the Voting Rights Act, but because that sparked it, I thought this was a good place to go.
For me, the Democratic Party emasculates Black men. And I think Hispanic men probably feel the same way. And I say this because they weaponize identity. When and where we enter, who we are, how we identify is important to who we are, just like our fingerprints. But if you're not going to use my identity to advance a social justice cause, and you're just going to use my identity as a blunt force object, now I got a problem. And so what the Democratic Party does, they put Black women on a pedestal and they say, we're the mothers of the movement, or we saved the party. But yet you don't put forth policies that save Black babies. You don't put forth policies that deal with the maternal death rate of Black women and Black babies in the United States of America. You don't do those things that lift and edify. Yes, identity is important. Both parties use it differently. Republicans use it to say that everybody black or brown or of a mixed race is somehow kind of way a DEI hire. They use it to say certain books will be banned. Don't tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about how this country was formulated, because you might hurt a white child's feelings by saying that, yeah, chattel slavery existed, and oh, by the way, white powerful folks stole the land from the indigenous people. So all of those things, Chinese Exclusion Act, I mean, we can go down the list. But Democrats use it in a way that alienates other folks, and it offends me. So when I talk to black men across this country, they don't see themselves in this party. It's one thing to recognize the power and prowess of black women and the sacrifices that we make. It is another thing to put us above black men. The black struggle, black men and black women have to be together. We don't have the luxury to be separated, and so I resent the Democratic Party for doing that. And so black men do not.
LaTrice, I'll let you respond to what Nina Turner. I'll just simply say I think she's on point from my perspective as a man, but your thoughts as a queen on the show, and we'll get Sniper's thoughts. And I thought it was an apropos because we're talking about the political environment, not specifically about what happened with the voters' rights.
Right. I absolutely agree with her. I feel that they use our identity to gain our loyalty, and for a large part, they have done that. But when you really begin to sit back, I won't say that they've not done anything, but they've not done enough if you look at the ratio for how they use us in their campaigns and to get elected. Once they get elected, they disappear. Our needs and the things that we need for our community take on, they get placed on the back burner. We don't have to take care of that now. We'll get to it eventually. And then the tide shifts and they never get to it. So I absolutely agree with her. I think we need to definitely be more strategic. And here is where I think we definitely need a plan where we do not have one. I think that, prior we do have plans, but in this specific area, we don't have a plan.
Good stuff. Let me say this real quick. Again, I love that clip from Nina Turner. I will highlight just as a political note, because again, as I say from the Politically Conscious show, we're not always aware of what we actually get from politics. So sometimes we have this concept that we don't get anything.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I'll even point out, because I don't know, this clip, she did this clip way before. This is not a recent clip. That happened just right, just recently, just so people know. But I will say that as she's highlighting, for example, the maternal death rate or whatever, specifically, there's no money going towards that cause right now. Whereas just a year ago, there was set aside money trying to figure out why are black women specifically having maternal death rates the equivalent of some undeveloped countries. We are last place in developed countries, specifically for black women getting off of the bed after having a baby. And I don't want to overemphasize that, but I do want to highlight there is a clear difference what's happening with this administration versus the money that was used for it in the past. So that's just one little thing that I like to be specific about as I learn more about politics. Sniper, your thoughts about what Nina Turner said? Again, I thought it was apropos because I felt like the political environment has brought about while we're having this conversation. And then after you talk, I'm going to actually share with you what you wrote on your page as well.
I think we are too psychologically dependent on the political system to move us forward. And while they might have the greatest intentions, they have let us down in a number of different ways. Also, I think a big problem with the political system is they tell us who we are. They tell us what we think what we want to hear or whatever. And I think that also contributes to a lot of the issues that we're talking about now. So she did mention a lot of different things that are important, but just strictly regarding the political landscape is that you can't have people tell us what we are or what we should be doing, right? And then we're getting the bad results that we're getting. So me personally, like I said, I think we're too psychologically dependent on the political system to move us forward. It's not to say we can't have allies. Obviously, throughout history, we have had allies, right? But in today's time, with the unique challenges that we're facing today, people are coming into our neighborhoods and disrespecting us right? And I'm not here to say who you should vote for, but I think anytime people are saying things among in nature of, if you don't vote for me, you're not black, things like that. When people are saying things like that, how can you just blindly go along with their agenda just because you don't like the opposite party? Once again, I'm not in support of either party or a person that's in office now. It's just saying that those type of things, black people should take a step back and say, well, should I exactly depend on this system to move me forward?
We got a comment that says the fatigue is so real. Well, I want to address that because I think that's a very fair feeling for the very reasons that we're talking about. Again, I think Nina Turner specifically laid out the issue, as she said, why she has so much resentment towards the Democratic Party, but highlighted the actual currently, I'll just kind of speak currently, that currently what's happening, there's these specific policies that are in a sense against our community. So I want to say for the sister that said, or I think it was a sister that said that the fatigue is so real. I understand the fatigue specifically when it comes to politics. I am going to say, however, because I have a politically conscious show, and the concept of the politically conscious show, is to raise your consciousness on the understanding of what politics actually gets you. And once you have that understanding, then some of the context in which we speak about politics may be corrected, because we do quite often say we don't get anything, and that's a far cry from what actually happens politically. So I'll keep kind of emphasizing that so that we don't talk in that extreme, if we will, or at least I would challenge us talking in that extreme, because once again, there are things that are very different based on how you vote locally and somewhat nationally, which people pay too much attention to, but locally can be the difference. I will use the example. I just recently voted in a special election that lowered, for example, the heating and electric cost. Little things like that we don't think about, or that we don't count as coming from politics. And so again, it's just a small example of something that we got that helped out those in this local community around me, because enough of us voted for it during the special election, even though it was such a low turnout. The people that got it, it could have been 100 people the other way, and we wouldn't have got it based on the people that had a different agenda. So I'm just saying stuff like that. Voting can matter. I think we make it too important, but not important enough, if that even makes sense. But let me share this comment from you, Sniper, that you wrote. I got it saved right here. Let me pull it up. I'm going to read this for everybody out there. Make sure. Yeah, I still got it pulled up. All right, these are some comments, and it just kind of relates to what I say is current times. And as I called and asked this brother to be on the show, I'll say that this comment is almost the reason why we're doing this show. So I want to give this brother his credit. He says, he wrote this back on May 29th, so this was just in the last month. Unpopular. This may be my last post on the topic for a minute, then I will move on. I'm speaking strictly to the femininity of Black women, not anything else. I'm saying what many want to say and deeply feel, but they can't because it is too unpopular, too socially risky. The femininity of Black women cannot respect the man that's a victim. It's impossible. It can't happen. Femininity can be understanding and compassionate, but no respect. My life is not in response to another man. It never will be. When a collective group of men view themselves as victims now, the vibe of the women is lowered to compensate. She must spend all her time over comforting him and reassurance of his worth. This will deplete any person over time. Femininity responds to resilience, strength, action, the overcoming. In 1846, okay. You said this in 2004. You said this in 2009. You said this in 2017. Now you're in my comments saying, what the fuck are you going to do about it? We don't need another history lesson. We need an actionable plan, preferably one without waiting for another party to do something for you, or for you to finally feel good about yourself. I don't think any women actually want to protest anything, especially if her life is at risk. They do it because it is socially validated and acceptable. The social climate encourages it. Sniper, I'll let you, I don't know, last time, you wrote this last month. I don't know if you read it since you wrote it. So just curious, any context you might want to add before I get LaTrice's thoughts on your post.
Sir, if I had a penny, not even a dime, if I had a penny for just every black woman that inboxed me about this post in particular, I don't know how much money I would have had. This post gave me so much visibility on so many different levels, including doing this show, because I really
Exactly.
feel like a lot of black women feel this way, that their feminine energy is dismissed because unfortunately a lot of black men view themselves as victims, right? And once again, all the answers are not going to come from this show, but this is to give context and perspective on why a lot of black women might do the things they do regarding relationships. Because if a man is viewing himself as a victim, you'll never move forward in that relationship. You'll never have leadership. You'll never have guidance. You'll never know, okay, are my kids exactly safe? And to me, that's the most dangerous part of it all, is producing offspring that you're going to preach that victimhood message to. So now even the next generation is affected by it. So I'm just really speaking the truth of a lot of women within the post, and the response was the response.
Fair enough. LaTrice, any thoughts to any the post or actually what he had to say? Your thoughts, Queen.
I definitely, agree with the call for self-efficacy, resilience, and in an action plan to move forward. I think that's definitely necessary, but I think that there's a difference between a person who uses history as an excuse to do nothing and a community that's actually doing the work of understanding why things are the way that they are so that you can navigate it strategically. And that's the path that the work that I do takes. And I don't think that work can be dismissed, because if we're ever going to have plans that actually work, we need to understand intimately the terrain in which we're working within. I think that had we understood that, we would not have had the erosion of civil rights that we are having right now. I think that we're having that because we didn't understand the landscape, or we took for granted that the landscape was smoothing when it really wasn't.
I mean, we've talked personally, so I agree with your last statement. I'll say in the context of this show, however, my however is the overwhelming response of, even in this, again, since we're talking about men,
Mm-hmm.
the overwhelming response of seeing, in a sense, at this point, black men, in a sense, look like they're, in a sense, just complaining. Or I'll say on my show, I talked about how I hated the call by the NAACP and some other celebrities asking the young men to, in a sense, sacrifice themselves by not going to certain schools. How I thought that it was a weak move to put that sacrifice on them, and there was no end game. I would say that's an opportunity to appear like what Sniper points out in his post. Anybody calling out the young people to make that sacrifice and talk about how easy they could actually do it, but not making the sacrifice themselves, is a bunch of leaders, and I'll say men for the sake of this show, who are appearing, just like Sniper says, it's not something that's going to appeal to the femininity of our women, as he specifically talked about that in that piece. But I feel like this is an overall discussion about our community as well, if that even makes sense. So I think that's the fear of appearing like that and having complaints and no solution. And how can we actually lead? We'll have a sister, like in the first clip, saying, when are the men going to stand up? That's a conversation that has to be had.
I don't disagree that it's a conversation that has to be had. I think where I push back and where I not necessarily disagree, but perhaps the words being used I disagree with is first of all, the line about, I think placing the onus on a man to change to appeal to a woman's femininity, to appeal to a woman, is not the right path to take. And maybe that framing is a way, because maybe that's what some men desire or whatever. But I think framing it in that manner without additional context. And I know on social media you can only post so much because you're going to lose the person. But I think that the nuances could be added to the comments around that. Like, it's not that saying that calling out racism is an issue. It's the calling out racism, throwing it out into the wild without having, or at least trying to design a plan to fix what's broken. And then instead of just throwing together something like the NAACP did with the appeal to the college, the college folks that are going to college and play sports, to appeal to them without an end game in mind, that's wrong. So I think that, in a sense, I think that framing, I understand why the framing was done because of social media, but the bigger context is we don't not call it out, but we don't also not plan.
Yeah, and I don't think either me or Sniper is even there saying that.
Right.
But Sniper, let me ask you, do you see how I think that request to the kids to do what they did with their NIL money coming from the NAACP, I think is an example of what you wrote about. That's the perspective I have. I'm just curious if you can see why I related to that when it comes to this political climate, if that even makes sense. What's your thoughts on, again, I think they're connected from my perspective.
So they are connected, right? I'm not asking black men to change to appeal to women necessarily, right? I'm asking them to change for themselves, and then women will naturally respond as such in a more favorable manner. So if you change just for the women, right, then you kind of back to step one. But if you, that's what I meant about coming up with a action plan, something that's comprehensive, something that's step by step that each person can get. Now, you made a great point about we didn't understand a lot of things from the past, and that's why we kept repeating the same mistakes, and that's extremely true, right? But with that said, we have to take accountability even within that and say, okay, now we have more knowledge than ever. We have the internet, we have technology, we know the things that Big Mama did wrong and Dad did wrong and Grandpa did wrong, the missteps they did in their careers or even personal lives, so that we can now move forward. So the post is speaking to about change the way you psychologically view yourself, because the way you view yourself is why you're getting the results that you have, right? And let me say this one thing, and then I'll give it back to you. Okay, so I was telling a woman that when I do a daily walk, right, 45 minutes a day. If it was sometimes an hour, right, and I still might go to the gym. But my point is, I do this walk, and many times on this walk, I see people that I know. So I'm saying people that I see every day. Hey, how you doing? Blah blah blah. But of course, sometimes I don't see people. I see people I don't know, right? I was telling a woman that when I'm taking this walk and I see a white person or let me say a non-black person crossing my path, right? And many times the non-black person will cross the street and see me, right? And then as soon as we pass each other, they'll come back on the same side that she or he was previously on. This does not offend me. I'm not affected by this at all. But when I told this story to the woman, she instantly got offended for me in some sense, right? And even another guy who overheard the conversation got mad about it too. He said, why they got to cross the street? Why they got to? I don't care why he crossed the street. It's not my concern why he crossed the street. It doesn't matter to me why. Why? Because I'm focused on me. I view myself in high regard. I have high self-esteem. I don't need you to do something to affect how I view myself.
Now, I love it. I as a young man, transitioned to where you are now, right? As a young man, I remember growing up in the South, that stuff like that, like you said, Sniper, bothered me. I transitioned now to where I laugh at it. That's their issue, not mine. It didn't change the path I'm on. If they want to go out their way because of their issue, have at it. So that's kind of the dialogue that again, that we're having here. I'm going to share a few of my words real quick that I wrote some time ago on LaTrice. I want both of y'all to respond to it very briefly. I want to go to another clip. I wrote this some years ago. It says, Black men's fears of protecting our queens. And I says, we subconsciously mask it in bravado and now pass this down as a version of manhood. Too many jump in this so-called gender war, blaming the women, unaware of our role in creating some of the masculine women on the other side of it. Getting rid of this trauma isn't easy for me either, but until we lead properly, only then will order prevail. I think it applies to this conversation. I don't know if y'all agree that it applies to this conversation. Just curious if you see the application to this conversation.
Could you
That's
read
the
that
question.
again?
Okay. I said, we subconscious of the Black men's fear of protecting our queens. We subconsciously mask it in bravado and now pass this down as a version of manhood. Too many jump in this so-called gender war, blaming the women, unaware of our role in creating some of the masculine women on the other side of it. Getting rid of this trauma isn't easy for me either, but until we lead properly, only then will order prevail. Do either of you see any application to this conversation today? Curious. I think it applies, but I'm curious if y'all see the connection.
It seems to allude more to the gender war that sort of exists in the Black community than this dialogue, I think.
Fair
and
enough.
he walks away.
Nah, fair enough.
So I absolutely see that as relevant today because in the absence of masculinity, right, women are going to take on what they believe they feel like they need to do, even if it's unnecessary. They're going to take extra steps to create the maybe even the illusion of security within themselves, which is what prompted the conversation in the first place. So
Right.
when men are not exactly doing what they're supposed to do, right? It's women are going to have fear concerns. They're going to have safety concerns, and yes, they will take on traits that they probably wouldn't take if that security and safety was there.
Yeah, and I'll say, related to the conversation, are Black men still facing racism? The reason I think it applies, I'm not saying I'm right. Again, that's why I asked both of you the question if y'all felt like it was applicable to the conversation. But the reason I think it applies is, again, if we're still facing racism, and I love Sniper's analogy about running around and people moving around him. There's a perspective where you can get distraught about that and try to figure out how to change that person who runs around you, or you can, in a sense, while facing racism, move in a manner that doesn't concern yourself with that, but staying focused on what you're focused on. And I'm not saying it's a direct correlation, but I think there is some connection to this conversation when we ask the question, are Black men still facing racism? I think we've all agreed systemic stuff exists, and we don't have to agree on everything. But we are talking about the navigation of what it looks like. And, this is mental dialogue, so I keep alluding to the psychology. And again, glad to have both of you here for this discussion. I got anybody want to? If you don't have a thought, I got a comment that I want to share real quick. But any thoughts to what I said before?
Well,
I share?
I do.
Okay.
I do think that if there were more Black men who showed up more consistently, that some of what gets called female masculinity, or what I call assertiveness, would likely transform. But I think we need to understand that the way Black women are didn't necessarily form inside of relationships. When we think about it, a lot of it's been handed down, and we talk about that, Montoya. We've talked about how, why we have that strong, independent Black woman context, and why it's been handed down from generation to generation. And there is a part that Black men have to own in that, but I think we need to look at, is it the chicken or the egg, which came first? when we look at that, the
And I
historical.
would offer that it's both, not even necessarily a chicken or egg thing. For this conversation, we're alluding to the men's part in it. So when you understand what I'm saying, LaTrice? So
I understand what you're
I'm
saying.
not acting like the other things are not part of it.
Right.
I'm just talking about what we're talking about today. Are Black men still facing racism? So we're speaking it from that part, the part that you would even agree that's been played. That's the part we're just talking about today,
Right.
if that makes sense. Go ahead.
And so I would say that the adaptation came second, because Black women developed self-sufficiency because the systems targeting Black men actually removed them. And so we had to develop self-sufficiency as a result of that. And so I think that where you're saying they're both the same, I think they're not.
And I'm saying at this point in today's time, despite the targeting, there's still a role we have to learn to play.
Absolutely. And I'm not negating that.
Yeah, I'm not saying before. I just want to make that clear. All right,
Okay.
let me highlight this comment, and then we'll go to another cut. Somebody who's watching Sniper says that Sniper asked Sniper to give us a plan then, because he keeps saying we need a plan, but what's the plan? What's the example of a plan? So just thought it was a fair thought from somebody watching Sniper. Any thoughts on that? And then we're gonna play another clip.
Once again, I mean, that's something, a very complex question. Do I have deep, very complicated post about that? Yes, I do. Obviously, I cannot answer such a complicated question in the minutes of this show. But the point is that a plan is needed, right? And I'll just mention this streamline real quick. So we talked about opportunities lacking and things of that nature. So, like I said, if you want to be a part of something, but there's stumping grounds, there's things why you can't advance. At some point, you have to accept, okay, I cannot advance in this. I need to come up with a plan so that I can still advance myself and my family. That's the point of what I'm saying. The point I'm trying to make in this conversation. What that plan might be, that varies depending on what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, what you're ultimately trying to accomplish. But the main point I'm trying to say is that you change today so that the next generation has a better future than you.
No, good stuff. All right, this next cut is going to kind of fall in line with what we were just kind of talking about, LaTrice, focused on, in a sense, the Black men of this again. And you may be right that the other thing created the other. So I'm not even arguing with you about that, but I'm just letting you know that this next cut is specifically about Black men, since we're asking, are Black men still facing racism? I think this is a factor that we have to think about. And I, once again, think this relates to the conversation. If you disagree, that's fine to say that as well.
I want people to tell me the truth, just like this thing's killer tell me that other people don't have the liberty to tell me, and it's good. Like, I'm not a person that's sitting somewhere like, yeah, I don't like this nigga. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's supposed to say it to me, and every now and then I tell him something that it's just what's supposed to be said. And I think this has a lot to do with these guys being their mother's son. If I could just sum it up, when you're raised by your mom, you're a different man. You're a different boy, and you don't like hearing stuff from other men. Like, that's really one of the biggest issues I see in hip hop and in sports, that you just have a bunch of guys that were raised by their mothers, so they never heard a man's take on what they're doing, so they can't hear it. And then we get upset, Killer. You be like, but he'll listen to his girl. He'll listen to his girl because he was raised listening to a woman. He don't listen to men at all. You'll say you have a problem with authority. No, he just have a problem with men. But if a woman tell him something, she can get him to bring his whole check to her, and it's crazy. So for all of you listening,
That's a really good point, man.
yeah, niggas is just raised by their mothers. I had a stepfather, you had a grandfather, so you know when a guy say what he said, that's what it is. That's why we carry that. So all they know is tantrums. All they know is attitude and facial expressions. People walk by, you like, why is he making his face like that? Because his mother used to do that. That's how his mother raised him.
Again, I think it relates to this conversation today. Y'all could disagree. LaTrice, your thoughts of how it relates from your perspective, or if it doesn't.
No, and I actually believe, just from a psychological perspective, that that's a true statement, because when a black boy is raised in a home with a single mother, they learn to receive correction, criticism, challenge, and from the adults who raise them. And so if it's a mother's correction, then that's going to have an emotional um, impact on that boy growing into a man. And so it is going to impact how he receives feedback, is challenged by other men, because for them, male authority is unfamiliar to them. They're not accustomed to it, and they may see that as a challenge, perhaps, to their manhood. And just from a purely psychological perspective, their emotional feedback loops actually become feminized, not calling them feminized,
Right.
but purely from a psychological perspective, just textbook psychological perspective, their emotional feedback loops get feminized.
And so this is the mental dialogue perspective. So Sniper, I'll throw it to you. But as we get into the psychology of things, some of the lack of the plan or the emotional response to, quote unquote, the voting's right act getting gutted is remnants of this having been a long-standing example of what's happened in our community. So I think it absolutely relates to how we as Black men are going to face racism, either with a plan or with a complaint. I feel like Mace was on point, and it actually plays a role in some of what we're seeing. So that's how I think it relates. Your thoughts, Sniper?
The clip was definitely true. You know, he made a lot of great points, and see, and it's so interesting that he said that, right? And then I posted what I posted. Instantly, I'm hit with backlash with a lot of men. It's an instant like, no, what are you talking about? Well, no, they need to change. They need to do this. They need to do that, right? So a lot of times, Black men see it as, oh, we have two enemies, the Black woman and the white man. And that's not exactly the case. The number one enemy that we'll have is ourselves if you don't come up with something. Because the brother, yes, you have a right to ask me what's the plan. But at the same time, I have the right to say, so you're going to continue doing what you're doing that's not working. You're going to continue to do what you're doing that's not having any positive effect in your life or your family's life, right? So when I posted that, while I did get a lot of praise, also got a lot of backlash. I got a lot of hate. I got a lot of comments and messages that said a lot of terrible things. So as Black men, we have to stop as soon as someone says something we don't like, we want to challenge it in a negative way instead of just stepping back and saying, okay. And like I always say in session with clients, is there truth to what's being said? Before I criticize it, before I tear this brother down, before I say something negative, before I curse him out and call him names, is there truth to what's being said? Is it accurate in some form before I say, some attack on him?
Let me let LaTrice stick in real quick, because I can tell her brain's running. So let me hear what she has to say real quick.
So I think I'm not negating anything that you said. I actually agree with it, but I think it takes looking at where that response is coming from, because if that person has had a father who's absent, especially if it's through abandonment or some type of betrayal, then any male figure in authority or in an accountability role can unconsciously trigger that wound. If it's a mentor that you're dealing with, that male peer that's offering criticism can possibly be perceived as the man who didn't stay in his life. And so words matter. And Montoya, you taught me this when we initially met, because I would go gung-ho on getting about Black people need to do this. It is important that the words that we use to help people understand, we have to take that into consideration. Do we want to get a reaction, or do we want to have impact? And if we want to have impact, then it's worth studying the psychology behind the concept that you're focused on to have greater impact. Or if you don't, you run the risk of having folks who get triggered and they respond from that feminized emotional feedback loop.
And I would offer that to a degree, we're doing exactly what you're saying with this conversation.
We are here.
Yep. And I'll highlight that in a limited post as Sniper posted.
Right.
I thought to a degree, speaking for the women in itself, was going to create that trigger. I don't think he's surprised that men are having this emotional response because he understands exactly what you said. So I don't think he approached it with the what I do always advise against. Black people always do this or this.
Well, he didn't approach it from that, but his words were still very sharp and not. I think they were designed to trigger and not create impact.
So if he's asking, is there some truth in it? Is that not in a sense a feather in listening to what's happening or what's being done without the trigger? Like it's kind of like saying it for what it is one thing, but he's offering the feather by saying, is there some truth in it? So I think it is an attempt to do.
But see, you got to first get past the trigger to get to the point where it says, is there some truth to it? Because you're going to be triggered in that instance when you read whatever it is. And then am I too triggered to get to that question? Is there some truth to it? Because so when I do diversity and inclusion work, one of the things that I learned when I talked about white privilege, I got arms folded. And that meant to me that was a defensive posture. And they didn't hear anything after the words white privilege. When I talked about unearned disadvantage of people of color and other historically underrepresented groups, there was an openness to understand more. And so all I'm saying is that his post was great, but they were triggered so much that they didn't get to the question, is there any truth to it? And some of them may have realized once that their amygdala was unhijacked that, you know what, there is some truth to that, but they may have been too ashamed of their initial response to come back and say, hey, dude, you were right. That's all I'm saying.
Sniper, your response. If I can steal a few more minutes from you, I want to play another clip after your response if you've got time.
I mean, sure. It was I trying to get your attention? Yes, absolutely. Was I trying to make you pay attention to what I'm saying? Yes, there was a cause in that. But at the same time, it's layered, right, with things that are exactly going on. Because I think if you just ask any woman in conversation, do you want a victim as a husband? Do you want a victim as a quote unquote partner, right? Do you want someone where every time you bring something to them, they're instantly victimizing themselves in the situation? I'm positive that any reasonable woman would say, no, I don't want that, because that means that our family, we're never going to make any forward progress. We're not going to get anything done. We won't be able to make a quote unquote impact, right? So those are just things that I'm challenging you, but it's from a place. It's the same thing Mace was saying, right? When he's talking about the mom and dad effect, that when you only see your mother's perspective, you copy after her, because anytime a man's directly talking to you, you instantly want to buck up and reject what's being said. So I understand triggers, right? They are powerful, and they can make you not see the whole statement. But at the same time, through triggers is also transformation. So you have to use that as a portal for change as well.
I don't think that triggers are transformation, because that response is coming from an unconscious place. It's operating below the threshold of rational engagement. And what that means is that the feedback, it never actually gets heard, because
so
they're mired in that.
I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just highlight that in your own self-work, what you're triggered by. If somebody can help make you aware of that the trigger is where the learning is, then that ends up being the portal in that standpoint. Things that I've improved on had made me release some of my personal triggers, but the trigger is the sign that there's an issue there. So it can be a portal in that sense.
I say that it's the reflection is where the learning comes. And if I'm so triggered that I can't ever get to the reflection point, then I don't have that learning. But we can agree to disagree on that for the sake of time.
All right, cool. Let me get to this next cut. Thank y'all for the extra time. All right, I'm going to skip a couple of these so we can get to the end here pretty quick. Here's now we're going to bring it back to the big picture as we have again focused on the men, because the conversation said, are Black men still faced with racism? And we kind of narrowed it down on the men. Here's a big picture look at the current times and how we often can look at racism from a perspective. This sister's name is Jade Breathe, and it just happened to come up on my feed. And this is how it always happens when I'm preparing for a show. The things I need just pop up. I literally just popped up on my feed a day or two ago, and I was like, oh, this is perfect for the show.
I know that I am unpleasant. I am painfully aware that I am unpleasant and off-putting to a lot of people in like the activism, social media, academia space. I have been told that I can come off as very dismissive. I hate that. I hate that it comes off that I am too idealistic when discussing systems of oppression, because you feel like I don't fully understand the gravity and the weight of it. And I hate that you feel like that, because that is not what is happening. What is happening is I know what our brains do when we spend too long talking about hard things instead of moving towards solutions. And I refuse to let my brain do that to me. There's a psychological phenomenon called symbolic self-completion, where when you tell people about a goal, when you name it, describe it, you get validation for acknowledging it, your brain gives you a reward. The same type of reward it would give you if you actually did something about it. Which means the more eloquently you describe a problem, the less urgency you feel to solve it. I have witnessed this in action for years in academic spaces, in activist spaces, online. People will spend a lot of time writing dissertations, explaining systems of oppression and problems in the society. And as soon as I offer a solution, I get laughed at and be like, you're not Martin Luther King, Jade. We have developed an entire intellectual infrastructure around naming oppression. We have the vocabulary, the frameworks, the reading list, the terminology that gets updated annually. And the systems are still here. Because describing the cage in perfect detail, it doesn't open the door. And here is where I probably lose people, because in my head, and I don't mean this as a dismissal, in my head, everything is made up. Money, borders, corporations, social hierarchies, beauty standards. Every system that has ever oppressed anyone has been constructed by human beings who got other human beings to agree to it. That's it. That's the whole mechanism. So my question is, the one I just cannot stop asking, if a group of people can get enough consensus to build something that lasts for centuries and that reshapes entire civilizations, why can't we build something else? Why is deconstruction the destination? Why are we spending our most energized, most passionate, most creative years studying and becoming experts on the architecture of a building we hate, instead of formulating and crafting the blueprints of a new one that we can love? I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to become fluent in my own oppression. I want to be dangerous to it. And if that makes me off-putting and unpleasant, I'll just have to eat that.
I can admit I spent years becoming fluent in our racism, passionate about helping our community. When I finally came up with the book, Re-Education of the Negro, and I started the Mental Dialogue Community Club, I actually transitioned to not wanting to simply be fluent in our racism and do the very things that she said, becoming eloquent in it and thinking I was making a difference. I wanted to, the Re-Education of the Negro is about the transition from that perspective into what's needed for the future. That's what those commentaries are. Some of them are triggering in the same way that we just talked about. They just challenge you to think, and hopefully your challenges, because I don't tell you what to think in the book, I just challenge you to think about racism in a different way. And I just love what she had to say. Sniper, I think a lot of the work that you do fits right in line with that sister name. Again, her name's Jade Breathe. Just came across it 2 days ago. I think a lot of the work that you do falls in line with that. Your thoughts about what the Queen had to say?
That was beautiful. That's we saying the same exact language. We're saying the same exact tone. I really enjoyed that clip because yes, that's the mindset that it's going to take to have actual change in the quote unquote Black community, right? A lot of these right now in the news, team takeovers. I don't need to understand why the team takeover is exactly happening. We need a solution to stop it. That's what needs to take place. Yes, we can have understanding about and education on it, right? But at the same time, and probably more powerful, is doing the steps to stop it from happening. So you said, and she said a mouthful, but
Right.
just out from what I got from it is it important to be educated on history? Of course. Do I want to understand how we got here? Absolutely. But once those two things happen, there has to be a solution. It
So
has
let me
to, and it
say,
has to be the embracing of that.
We
so
can't
let
hear
me
you.
say this
You're going.
Go ahead.
to you. I think the Miss Sniper is, and I love you giving that. Okay, hear me? Okay, hold on one
We
second.
can't.
Y'all can't hear me at all?
I hear
You're
you.
You can't hear
breaking
me?
I
up.
hear you.
Go ahead and respond, Latrice.
No, I couldn't hear you. Is what I was saying.
You can hear me? Oh, okay.
I
So
can.
it might be
You're
your end
going
this
in
time.
and out. You're breaking up.
Oh, you can hear me now though?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me now? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So what I want, the little small challenge I wanted to give to Sniper is when he said, like, I love the team takeover analogy. When he says we need to, kind of solution to stop it, not as concerned with the why. And I think the miss is we are capable of doing both. Understanding the why helps you come up with the solution. I think most dialogues in our community are people doing one or the other. And because somebody's so, as she said, so caught up in the why, they're not moving to the solution that you would like to hear, Sniper. And we literally battle over, well, what's the solution? And somebody's stuck in the why. And the answer is you have to understand the why to get the solution. And so stop arguing over one or the other. And we literally fail to bring the why with the solution. That's where I think the failure has been for as long as I've been doing this work, if that even makes sense.
And so I think that number one, to take a stance that I've transcended victimhood is problematic in and of itself. But for the sake of time, I'm not going to go there. I actually agree with what you said at the end, Montoya, about when I think about symbolic self-completion, it actually in the context of this victimhood conversation, it's actually three conversations, simultaneous conversations being had as if they're one. It's a conversation about what's real. Structural racism is documented and its effects are measurable. It's a conversation about what's strategic and how does calling out what those things are, how does naming it serve or undermine our collective action? And the third conversation is about what is psychological. When does an accurate analysis become an identity residence that substitutes itself for action? And I think that's where Sniper sits with the conversation. And all three of these conversations are legitimate, though. All three of them are. All three need to happen, but they require distinction, is what I'm saying.
No, I love it. I love it. Again, I think this is what makes mental dialogue what it is. This is a deeper dive into this conversation. All right, matter of fact, I'm gonna do one more clip. Y'all got time for one more clip? Both of you want to be respectful of y'all time?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right, cool. This is a clip I'm gonna shoot to, and I'm actually gonna play part of it just to cut the time down. Again, I think it makes us think about what we're talking about today, and then I'm gonna close with a clip where it closes the show, so y'all won't have to stay on and respond.
You said something just now, though, about you pushing independence, right? Kind of like in the spirit of Prince. When you embody that, do you feel like you are kind of setting a mold or leading a charge for like what the successful black man is allowed to do, and like breaking these spaces, breaking these confines?
Yeah, I even want you to take that out of your vocabulary.
Take what?
Allowed. You know what I'm saying? We're not allowed to do anything. You know, in order for someone to allow you, they have to have authority over you. Mm-hmm. No one has authority over us. We exist like everyone else here. Yeah. No one can allow us to do anything. But that word comes from a real space. And I want to eliminate all those type of words for us. Yeah. Yes. So the answer to that is yes.
I watched a video on YouTube recently titled, "Is It Time to Get Over Slavery?"
You said something just now, though, about you pushing independence, right? Kind of like in the spirit of Prince. When you embody that, do you feel like you are kind of...
As he said right there. That's the transition. The transition is, from my perspective, the transition, my opinion, I'll say that. The transition is a lot of what we learn, even from our public school system. It doesn't, I've said this all the time, it doesn't properly esteem our Black children. So therefore it is on us to ensure that they are properly esteemed. And to me, that's just seeing enough and knowing, in a sense, what the ancestors actually did versus what they're going to get taught in school. I think understanding that you come from something lets you understand that you now are something. So as long as you're properly esteemed, that in itself is the goal. And when you're properly esteemed, then you think like Hove or Jay-Z is thinking in that place. Like the kid asked a question and he goes, yes, that's what I'm doing. However, I want to challenge you to take away the word allow. And so the stuff that you learn systemically will have you constantly talking to our community, Black men, for this conversation, as if something is inherently wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with us, nor is there anyone who, in a sense, can allow you. And I'll say that I feel like, credit to the ancestors, we live in a time where we get to say this. They couldn't always say what Jay-Z said right there, and recognizing it is we're like anyone else. That's the dialogue. And once you understand that, I think we'll be more strategic in how we move against even the systemic things that still exist in 2026. So I know I kind of gave a rant there. Sniper, you're our special guest. Any thoughts to what I had to say? And then I'll let my co-host LaTrice kind of close us out before I play the last clip. Are you on mute, brother, by accident? You're on mute, just so you know.
Yes. So it's important to recognize, once I was saying earlier, how you psychologically view yourself, how you're speaking to yourself, how do you speak about others around you, right? How do you speak about people who look like you, right? Because a lot of the situations that we get into, or the reason why, we'll buck up super fast against a Black man is because we don't value the Black man versus others. We look at them in high esteem. That's why, the same way he says stop saying allow, I say stop comparing yourself with other people. I don't care about what Asians are doing. I don't care about what white people are doing, right? White people do this. Okay, that's good for them. What are we doing? That's what I'm focused on, right? So when we compare ourselves constantly, there is going to be that feeling of, well, are we good enough? Are we really capable of, etc. Versus eliminating that and being laser focused on looking at what's reflecting you in the mirror and seeing it as beautiful.
Yep. LaTrice, again, I love how the young brother being sincere, admiring Jay-Z, saying, hey, do you think you're breaking the barriers to allow Black people to do something? And Jay says, hey, the answer is yes, but brother, take that word out of your vocabulary. I love that thought. LaTrice, what is your thoughts on that as well?
I love it too. I think that it's something that comes from the conditioning of the sort of oppressive structures that we have to navigate daily, where we unconsciously feel that we have to be allowed to do certain things. And I think it's a certain amount of liberation that you feel when you remove that allow and you own moving forward. But I think that it's important that we understand that you simply identifying the issues is not necessarily victimhood. Staying there and that's all you do, absolutely is victimhood.
Right.
But when you look at the vast majority of our community, I don't believe that's where we sit. When we look at the vast majority of Black men, I don't think that's where we sit.
Nah, good stuff. All right, Sniper, man, thank you for your time. Because you mentioned the Asians, I'm going to read this one more post from the sister by the name of Dottie Reynolds. LaTrice, I definitely want to steal your thoughts on this, and then I'm going to close. But I just want to respect your time, Sniper. Thank you for the day, brother. And then let people know how to follow you and get your books. If you will, type it in the chat, and I'll put it on the bottom before I close the show. So type in like a URL I could put in the so people can see that when we close the show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you again for inviting me. I appreciate the time. Appreciate the panel. You know, it's an honor to be here. You can always reach me on Facebook, Intellectual Sniper, JC Offer. I know it's a long name, but just type in Intellectual Sniper. I should pop up on Facebook. On Instagram, you can reach me at The Intellectual Sniper. And of course, you can send me a message on either one, Facebook or IG. And of course, if you just type in on Amazon, Jamar Camper, my books do pop up.
No, good stuff, brother. Thank you for your time. I'm gonna ask LaTrice to stay on. Let me put one of these banners up before you leave, just so I can see I keep my word. So which one you want to put up? Intellectual Sniper? I'm gonna put that up on the banner.
Yes,
All
definitely.
right, let me put that up real quick before you go. Again, so you know I ain't just telling you I did it. All right, brother. So let me add this banner. It'll stay up to the show closes. I hope I did it right. Hold on. Here we go. There we go. So type that in, y'all. That's how you follow this, brother. Thank you for your time, brother. LaTrice, I'm still just 2 more minutes from you.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank
And
you,
it's just
Patrice.
because
Thank you.
thank you, brother. And it's because intellectual hyper mentioned the agent. That's the big thing. That's the hype right now, right? And I think this is a great way to close our show. And this is just a reminder from a sister, a brilliant sister that I follow. I love a lot of what she has to say. And she has a post that she just put up yesterday that says, on Asian hate, it is a complete and utter waste of energy to direct anger at an entire community of people. You'll be better off redirecting that exact same energy to elevating your own life, not because you're above it or trying to claim some moral high ground, but because harboring that kind of collective resentment is simply not conducive to your mental or physical health. When you choose to house hatred, you're poisoning your own body from within. From a neuroscience perspective, chronic hatred and anger keep your brain trapped into a perpetual state of high stress. Over time, this actively rewires your neural pathways, which erodes the connections responsible for high-level logic, creativity, and strategic problem solving, while strengthening the pathways for fear and aggression. Nobody is worth that. Literally hating an entire group of people impairs your cognitive function. It decreases your capacity to think clearly when you sacrifice your brain's processing capacity to obsess over them. Collective blame is a low vibrational loop. Pull that emotional and energetic release back. If you're spending your mental capital on hatred, you have less bandwidth left to build your biz, focus on interpersonal relationships, and is quite literally the antithesis of self-preservation. The same thing that happens when you stay in any toxic relationship. It hinders you because you're going to keep living their life all while you're miserable. The pattern of self-destruction doesn't change regardless of your reason, no matter how justified it may be. I love this post right now at a time like this, and that's why you won't see on any of our IG page or our Facebook page any time given to what's currently looking like this group versus this group because of a very sensitive. I definitely acknowledge the sensitivity of that situation. I'm not simply saying right now, if you're watching me, to ignore it. However, I live, like Dottie says, I'm not going to waste time having collective thoughts and cut discussions, and it doesn't serve me to be strategic about how I want to move with my people that I've chosen to live near and care about, to the degree that I will tell you, in a sense, don't waste time getting caught up in that emotion of that very sensitive situation. I acknowledge how sensitive it is. I don't want to talk about the right and wrong of it for the reasons that she said. Your thoughts, LaTrice, and then I'm going to close the show with one last clip.
I agree. I think that, because there's a video of this one Asian guy who's making a lot of inflammatory remarks, and he's bought into what back in the day, the model minority myth that was popularized as a means to sort of keep Black folks in their place, because sort of the premise behind that was that if you just behave like this model minority here, then the privileges that we're allowing them to have, the promotions that we're allowing them to take advantage of, would also happen to you. So I think we need to understand the history behind the the tension that realistically exists between the Asian community and the Black community, and understand the rationale behind that, because it was something that was intentionally done.
Yes,
and we need to understand that the work that intentionality is still working in today's society.
Yeah. And what I always say, in a sense, the re-education of the Negro, the psychological aspect is what I'm focused on.
Mm-hmm.
We just so often overlook the intentionality and get stuck in the results that those who were intentional want. And so as long as you stay stuck in that intention and miss that this was done purposely, then you will fall for the trick bag every time. Thank you, LaTrice. Any information you want to give them before I play this last clip?
No, just there are a few things that I'm working on. My book, Falling Black in Love Again, will be released soon. And I'll also be launching the Well-Read Black Woman Dinner Society, where we're going to dress up and have a 3-course dinner and discuss books, have conversations with authors, and just have an all-around good time.
Now, good stuff. If you like what we're doing today, make sure you subscribe to the page. If you're in Atlanta, we definitely have the Mental Dialogue live experience on the third Friday, which is June 19th, actually falling on Juneteenth. So definitely go to mentaldialogue.com to see the details for our upcoming event. I'm actually going to be featuring LaTrice again as we discuss, what if the world only had one race? We're going to go do a deep dive on this Juneteenth, intellectual deep dive. We're the smartest networking event in the city once a month, every third Friday over at Urban Grind. Here's a quick flyer that's just probably going to be hard to see here. So actually, I didn't hit the wrong button. But anyway, let me close out with this clip from 4 years ago, which you're seeing right now. Me and his brother, William Agnew, talked about 4 years ago. And I think it's an appropriate close for today's show. Hope y'all enjoy it. Please share it with others. And also subscribe to the page. Once again, let me say that, the Mental Dialogue YouTube page. All right. Thank you, LaTrice, for your time. You can stay for this clip if you want. It's your choice.
All right.
In the very beginning, we don't allow for enough diversity of thought.
Exactly.
Because all groups are diverse. No group is monolithic.
Exactly.
But we have a concept because, unfortunately, being on the bad experience and the oppressed end of how America created itself, when in a sense, race is the backbone, unfortunately, that created this country. There was the genocide of the Native Americans and then the enslavement of us. That is still the backbone, and it systematically has played out to the point where most of us, one, don't know that it's a construct, and two, as the world is going global and moving off of it, we're staying stuck over here. And still, remember, we talked about this on some of the shows, silly stuff such as, you being smart was looked down upon because of our own hurt and own trauma that we have. So we're stuck in this construct of whether you're black enough or not. And this is some made up shit.
Exactly. It's the same kind, like, bro, you hit it on the head so much, because what it does is it simpletons you. It simplifies you. So now what you're doing is every debate, every issue, every question, every offense, everything is under the guise of race. And so it's easy to debate. It's easy. So what it does is it makes it easy for the opposition to go, bro, why is everything race with you? Why is it the race card with you? Everything's the race card with you, right? What's going, like, and you hear this all the time. But here's the deal. No matter what the issue is, right? 60 to 70% of the time, what are we going to fall back on? Race.
The construct.
The construct.
And let me say this, and I'm going to end this thing. I'm going to say this.
Okay.
Because here's the flip side of what you're talking about, is when a Magic Johnson or somebody goes up, expires into business, starts making key relationships. We know Magic Johnson is very committed to our community, but I can tell you in Lansing, Michigan, I know from a friend, they don't necessarily feel that way in Lansing, Michigan, because of the viewpoint that you and I are talking about now. And so what happens is all other groups have the freedom to expand and diversify as necessary to get their hands on as much resources as possible. We have because we see it through this lens, have a certain way that it's supposed to happen. And if it don't, we'll throw somebody who's actually committed to us in the best way that they can. We'll start throwing them under the bus because of this lens.
Throw them away.
That's a made-up construct from the very beginning.
100%.
So we're holding accountability, and what most people learn is, fuck that accountability. Let me secure my resources.
Wow.
Some people decide, I'm just going to only do this for my family. And we don't realize we drove them to that because we're buying into this construct.
Right.
I think you're getting what I'm saying, but I wanted to bring that
no.
challenge today. So
You bringing it
one
home.
last thought, and I'm going to read this piece. Go ahead,
Okay.
Ken.
You bringing it home, because at bringing it home, full circle, everything we just talked about, the full circle is the impact of that. So the impact of all of that is that you don't practice, you don't sharpen your sword, you don't sharpen your skills. Your skills stay dull because everything that you argue is under race. So what you don't is you don't have expansive thinking, right? When there's an issue, you're solving every problem. What happens if we solve every problem with the same solution? There's no expansion. We don't grow. We don't become smarter. We don't become intelligent. We don't dive into those things. We don't listen to those things. Like you said, we throw those people away when they come with a different idea about what the solution is. And if we don't go, oh, it ain't race for you, what do? Like you said, we throw them under the bus because we think everybody has the solution or the answer or the problem is all about race. And that is the mind fuck is so fucking sweet, bro. Because if you want to control the people, what you do is you do exactly what we understand is being done. You give a little bit, right? You pacify, right? You accept to a certain degree, and you let them, and then you give a little counter intuitiveness to that, or a little hypocrisy. And what they do is they fight that with the same solution for eternity.